as you know, Bosch and I have been longtime admirers of yours, as have the Tammy Bruce audience. I think the people in her chat room have said to give you a hug on their behalf, whatever that is.
Sounds good.
But, as you know, that red-eye presidential graphic actually started as something that we hoped would be your United States presidential campaign poster for the 2012 elections. And, we agree with so much of what you say on so many topics, but we thought it would be interesting here to focus on what is actually a point of disagreement. And that's the case of Edward Snowden. He recently leaked the information about the intrusive NSA programs. And you have this week referred to him as a traitor, and you've called for him to serve multiple life sentences in prison, if I recall correctly. And I was wondering what you thought of the NSA programs themselves, the ones that Snowden disclosed, insofar as they collect information without probable cause or particularized suspicion about ordinary Americans.
Well, let's talk about what exactly the NSA is doing, at least with respect to these two programs, because the NSA is doing a lot of things, fortunately most of which have not been disclosed. But the basis on which the NSA acts is to collect foreign intelligence. That's what's going on here. This is not a comprehensive program to snoop on Americans. This is designed to go after communications by foreigners that don't have any Fourth Amendment protection. So a lot of what the NSA is doing is taking advantage of communications that come through the nodes that the United States has, that communications from all over the world go through, whether it's internet or telephone, that a call from one country in Europe to another country in Europe, for example, might go through equipment in the United States, or emails or internet communications go through servers in the United States. And a lot of the PRISM program in particular is designed to catch those communications. Now, the other program that's been talked about, particularly Verizon, is saving records of phone conversations, not to search them indiscriminately, but to save them. Somebody said, to find a needle in a haystack, you have to make sure you still have the haystack. And if you don't save these records, they will disappear because they're essentially electronic. But before NSA or anybody else can access these programs to look for Americans, they have to get a warrant from the FISA court that meets the Fourth Amendment standards. So while the information may be there, it's not being searched except in a constitutional way. And I think it's important to understand that. I think there's so much distrust of Obama that people assume that everything that he's involved in has a risk of abuse. And I'm certainly not going to defend Obama, but I would say this: the guts of this NSA program were created during the Bush administration.
Right.
And the fact is that we've had lawyers and representatives from all three branches of government operating this program. It's not like the Benghazi scandal. It's not like the abuse of the IRS or the investigation of journalists like James Rosen of Fox, all of which are done exclusively by the Obama administration.
Now, a couple things here. As far as what I've read in terms of the order compelling Verizon to turn over the records, I think that they're actually turning over call records and, in the terms of the order, fully domestic call records as well. So I actually do see, the government compelling a company to turn over these records. Now, of course, they do it in conjunction with a third-party doctrine. You're familiar with that, right, which makes it law. And
right.
as you've said, all three branches have at one point or another signed off on the fact that the third-party doctrine is law and that certain things that you share with these third parties, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy attached to it. So that's the sort of thing that you're referring to, right?
Well, it goes to when a citizen has a legitimate expectation of privacy. And if you had your own telephone wires and the phones at both ends, then you might have an expectation that that call couldn't be monitored by the government unless it had a warrant with probable cause. All they're doing is they're not your telephone records. They're Verizon's telephone records. It's their system that you're using. Now, so what they're doing is taking those records and storing them. But before the government looks into those records, it has to go to the FISA court and get a warrant approved by the FISA court. If Snowden or anybody else had evidence that the Obama administration was looking through those records without a warrant, it would be a very different circumstance. He has not alleged that.
Right. Now, the only thing is, though, is that there's many of us who believe that third-party doctrine is wrong, and that we actually think the fact that I turn some piece of information over to Verizon or Apple or Facebook or whatever, that doesn't necessarily entitle the government to make me part of the haystack, so to speak, you know? And
but the question is, whose information is it? And the answer is, because it's Verizon's system, it's Verizon's information. And that is a doctrine that's been true long before anybody thought up the NSA program.
Oh, yeah.
Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example. The market capitalization of Facebook today is somewhere between $50 and $60 billion. Now, do you think that the international financial community, which is as cold-hearted as any community in the world, values Facebook at $50 billion because they're excited about putting pictures of your 10-year-old's birthday party on your Facebook page? No, they value Facebook because of the information it's collecting. You know, that's people I think don't understand when they go on the internet. They're just not accessing other websites. They are putting out information about themselves, and they're putting it out to other people who are using it, and that has nothing to do with the government.
No, but what does happen is, because of this doctrine, which has been in place since the 1970s, then those companies can then turn it over to the government without it, you know, triggering the Fourth Amendment at all. And I think that's what a lot of people are starting to realize and be worried about. And maybe this is going to give us a chance to go ahead and challenge this. But let me ask you another question. In terms of security and this being necessary for security, is there any kind of invasion of privacy that you would think would go too far in this realm in terms of cyber space?
Well, I think the protection that the Fourth Amendment requires a warrant based on probable cause has held up pretty well over time. And, you know, if anything, the protections built into the NSA programs have grown. Going back to 2008, you know, when Bush originated this program, he based it entirely on his constitutional authority as president under Article 2. There wasn't any statutory basis for it at all. Now Congress has enacted a statute approved by the president that defines the way the program is supposed to work. So, you know, we've got a constitutional system. We have an elected president and an elected Congress with authority to act, and they have acted. That is democratic legitimacy, and they have given approval, the final approval for the searches, to the FISA court, which is comprised of Article 3 judges, otherwise nominated and confirmed by the Senate, appointed by the Chief Justice. So I mean, I don't know how much more protection you can build in.
It's just that, you know, some people question whether our lawmakers have been fully informed. Some people have questioned whether some of the judges have served as a rubber stamp. So suppose you are someone and you've been given this top secret clearance, and then having been given this top secret clearance, you think the program goes too far, and you think you want to disclose it to the American people to start this debate about it. I'm not sure how it could be done other than by someone like Snowden. I mean, if you truly believe that this system is wrong, it's based on a legal regime that's wrong, he knows everyone signed onto it.
Who died and made him king?
I mean, he's going by his own rational judgment. I understand.
There are 300 million Americans whose security has been jeopardized by his unilateral action. The one thing you can say about what the president and Congress and the courts did was they acted with democratic legitimacy. He is one guy who violated the word that he gave that he wouldn't reveal this classified information. That's dishonorable.
Now,
if everybody decided what laws they were going to adhere to, society would break down.
I mean, what you have to do sometimes, though, is if you decide yourself that something goes too far and then you decide you're willing to take the consequences within reason, then you do what he's doing. Now, I agree with you. You can't expect the U.S. government to not go after him and not prosecute
So you
him
would
to the
think it would be perfectly
okay
okay in World War II for some disgruntled scientist to go public with the Manhattan Project?
No, I think. I think
why not?
In
his conscience, I don't think so at all. In that person's conscience, the program could lead to untold destruction. So he felt it his moral imperative. Why? Because he's smarter than the rest of us, better than the rest of us. That's what the problem with Snowden is. We all of the rest of us, we struggle through with the democratic system. I don't like the fact Obama's president. I've voted against him twice. I don't like probably the half the things that Congress does, but when you're in a constitutional system, you take the good with the bad. You have your opportunity. You get to contest elections. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose.
I mean, I would say I agree with the evaluation about the wrongness of this program that Snowden makes, whereas I disagree with the person who says that it's wrong to develop the atom bomb or nuclear weapons. I think that those are valuable in our arsenal. So I would judge the person.
But see, that's your personal preference, which we all have. But you can't run a country with everybody expressing their personal preferences, disregarding the process that gives us legitimate constitutional decisions, which is what has happened here. That's why the force of all three branches of the government, unlike Benghazi, unlike the IRS, where it's only one branch of government and maybe only one part of one branch of government that's acting, when all three branches act together, there's no guarantee that they will always act correctly. But the framers only gave us three branches. That's all we've got.
Right, but they also gave us the people, and they set an example of being able to judge when it's time to revolt and no longer work within the system. I see him as a small example of doing that, and I agree. He can't expect to, quote, get away with it and not suffer any consequences. But
when Benjamin Franklin addressed the Continental Congress, when they signed the Declaration of Independence, he said, "Well, gentlemen, we must all hang together, or surely we will all hang separately," because he knew they were committing treason. And that's what Snowden has done here. It was not in his authority to reveal this information. He did it because his conscience made him do it. Okay, fine, then he can pay the price.
Yeah, I mean,
but the fact is, we are going to suffer because of Edward Snowden.
How
our adversaries have gained information which, put together with other information and other information that will undoubtedly come out in the course of this as it plays out, they will now know a lot more about how to evade scrutiny by our intelligence agencies, and that will enable them to do things that could harm us and harm our friends and allies around the world. That's the risk of what happens when people take the law into their own hands. Snowden, in a way, is like his own lynch party. Not satisfied with the way the system is handling a particular issue, so he decided to handle it on his own.
I mean, I guess what I would need to then hear is more specifics about how exactly we'll be harmed and whether that harm is just because of getting rid of a program that I don't necessarily believe that our government should be, conducting in the first place. But I think where you and I could agree, Ambassador Bolton, I definitely want to end it on something that we agree on, which is that all of this endless scrutiny and these, programs and the TSA fondling us at the airports and stuff, all of it would be unnecessary if we would conduct a proper foreign policy, if we would fight wars appropriately against the right people, name our enemy appropriately, and I think you've been very good at doing that.
Well, thank you. No, I mean, look, this is an issue that goes to the survival of a free system. and it's very important to prevent the government from encroaching on our liberties at home. But it's even more important, I think, to remember that the gravest threats come from people around the world who want to destroy our entire society, and that's where we've seen, I think, our adversaries benefit. But we're going to have this debate, and we'll see where we go.